Hey guys, welcome back to the Steel Forum. Today we have the first in a three-part series with Mr. Bruce Vaughan, the man, the legend. One of the most prolific parametric writers for SDS2. He's written most of the parametrics that we use in our work every day. Really appreciate that hard work from him. We got to hear a little bit about how he got started, how he learned writing those parametrics, some of his history, and why he thinks it's important that we all interact, network, and share what we have to make ourselves better. All that and more today on the Steel Forum.
I actually don't know what I'm doing.
That's just the way of it at this point.
I don't understand.
Oh, I hit escape. Hey! Due for 2018. They fixed it.
So I'll have to cut that part out.
Yes, I guess you will.
That's a heck of an office you got, Bruce. Is that a home office or is that a office?
Yeah, this is a home office.
Nice.
We got the whole basement.
A whole yeah, that's the classic, right? The basement office for the detailer.
Well, they used to call us basement detailers.
The basement.
Bedroom detailers.
Bedroom detailers?
Yeah.
I used to literally have in my bedroom a desk and all that stuff. So like if I was working late at night, my wife would yell at me.
It used to be in my living room. My drawing board was in my living room, yes.
Yeah. And it takes a long time too to like move out of there. And when we first started the company, I made an office. This is my old house in the basement. It was a raised ranch, so it was only half a basement, but it doesn't really matter. But my wife ended up getting mad at me because I was working all the time and I never saw her. So when we moved here, I put my office in like a general area where like people kind of walk through. It's like my living room, so that I would still be with the family even when I'm not with the family. So
Understood. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So yeah, we're excited to have you. It's weird because like to me you're a celebrity, right? Mm-hmm. And it sounds silly, but I use your stuff. I use your parametrics every day, and we've worked like I used to work with you on parametrics way back when, kind of when they. I don't want to say first came out, but when they were still like you could add material, but you couldn't add members.
Right. Yeah, I remember we did some going back and forth with information for a long time, didn't we?
Yeah, and there was a big, like, I can't remember what release it was, but finally you could put members in through parametric, and it was like, oh, this is like, we can do all of these things. And then, I left, I went on to other things for a while, and you just kept going and learning. And like, I'm still at the point that I was with writing parametrics back in 2008. And like, you've got this code where I read it now and I have no idea what this says. I have no idea.
Yeah. I have that problem sometimes too when I go back and look at my own code.
Yeah. By every parametric I ever wrote was headed with, written and poorly commented by Nick Coffey. Because I never really made them with the idea of this, somebody else should be able to read this and understand what's going on.
Well, I have in the past made an effort to make it readable. Sometimes you could compress your code, do more object-oriented type, more functions, calling more functions, making the code, trying to make your code more compact, but the readability suffers. So that's what I have tried to do, and there are some routines that I've gone and looked at that there's no way I can figure out how this works.
Yeah.
Unless I change something and see what happens.
But that's okay, right? Like there's some typically if I'm trying to do something with a parametric like yours, I do like to be able to edit. Like there's one in particular, the bent plate pour stop.
Yeah.
Where I wanted it to cope around the moment plates at the end.
Right.
And so, I had to go in there and find that spot where you do those fit routines that just kind of tweak it a little bit, which I think is the level that most power users should be at, right? Just, you don't have to be able to write the parametric from scratch, but you should maybe learn how to tweak it so that it can do some of the stuff that you want to do.
Right. And yeah, right. You don't have to know a lot about programming in order to do that. That's right.
Yeah. it's gotten, I would say, a little bit more concerning in that the stuff that SDS2 releases now, their components, some of their parametrics, they're not releasing that many parametrics anymore, mostly components. But now they're all encrypted, they're compiled. I don't know if it's encrypted or compiled, but either way, they're not usable or editable by the user. So we've lost some of that sense of, I want to say, community, where it's like, okay, you took us 90% of the way, and I can just tweak this the way I want. Now we've got to come from scratch and build it up.
Parametrics as they were are pretty much obsolete. They're, everything's gone to components, and that's great. But I've kind of hit a brick wall where I'm not really doing much writing anymore. When I do mess with some code, it's just to tweak something.
Yeah, is that you've done everything? Like Matt and I are convinced. Matt tells me this all the time, that Bruce Vaughan never actually models anything. Like, he just has a series of buttons that he presses, and
that's not true.
There's a model. There's a model.
I'm a pretty fair modeler, I think.
I bet.
I do a lot of modeling. A lot of it is just straight modeling. Just jump right in there and start adding stuff.
So I take it it's just you there. You don't have employees. You don't have a partner.
Right. It's just me.
Is that by choice, or you just never found another person to get on board with you?
Well, back in the beginning, I did a collaboration with several other detailers, and it all started when I was moonlighting. I was moonlighting with these other detailers, and at some point in time, it seemed the right thing to do just to moonlight full time.
Yeah, that's like the detailer story, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. A lot of people do this same thing.
Yeah, you put a little money away in the bank by doing these side projects, and then someday you just go to the boss and say, "Sorry, time to go." I did not.
Well, yeah, at the time we had a pretty good backlog, and so it just seemed the right thing to do. I was making better money working on weekends than I was at my regular job.
Yep.
So, I mean, there was one particularly tough weekend where I had to put in a lot of hours, and that's when I decided, looked at the backlog we had, and that's when I decided, well, now's the time to do it.
Yeah. I will say to the prospective detailers out there who think that going off is just the way, like, there's the billing rate that you charge for detailing, and I'm not private about ours. We're in 2019. We're upping our rate to adjust it for inflation up to $82.50 an hour. But a lot of detailers who are working in house, they're like, oh, I'm making $20-$30 an hour. I could be making 75. It's not like that. That's not how it works. You're not making $75 an hour for 40 hours a week. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into it. That, yeah, if you draw something for 3 hours, sure, you can charge that your drafting rate for those 3 hours. But on the other side of that, there's a whole bunch of work that's going on in the background to get those 3 hours, and there is a lot of stress and stuff that goes along with it. So I don't know. We think it's the way to live, but there are some cautionary tales.
Well, you also need to consider too the overhead that you're now taking on. When you work in house for a fab shop, you are just detailing. Whereas if you step out on your own, now you're going to have to keep books. You're going to have to estimate. You're going to have to project manage. Maybe you did some portion of that in house for a fabricator, but once you go out on your own, you've got to do it all.
Right, and you don't have to worry about back charges. Yeah, when you work for a fabricator, you don't, or just not getting paid. I don't know. Do you work for a lot of different clients, Bruce, or do you have a couple that you just keep you busy?
There are primarily I'll do almost all my work for two fabricators. I would strongly suggest that you don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the long run, anyway. I have full confidence that the fabricator I do most of my work for would not take advantage of me, but I know there are fabricators out there that would tend to take advantage of you if you were to work for them and be married to them and totally dependent on them for your work. That's where networking comes in. I also strongly suggest that you network with other detailers that can help you in the long run.
Yeah. Speaking of which, are we going to get you out to the NASCC?
I don't know.
It's so close.
I'm thinking about it.
I actually don't know.
It's not
Like,
far, right? It's St. Louis, right?
Right. That's within. You could make a drive if you felt so inclined. And for me, it's not really about the whole conference thing. It's great, but what it does, not only that networking, but the feeling of, all right, these people are going through the same thing. These people, like some of these people, are doing really exciting and interesting things, and I want to do those things too. So I try to go every year. I didn't go last year, but I try to go every year because it kind of reignites that, hey, keep innovating, keep growing, keep learning thing inside of you, which I think specifically for detailers is really important.
I think it's a great idea to go NASCC at least once or twice in your career. I went several times. I think the last one I went to, other than Nashville, was Orlando. And I thoroughly enjoyed all the times I did visit.
Yeah, if they held it in Orlando, I would be there every time because afterwards I can take my family to Disney World and I'm perfectly
You
happy.
get to expense most of the trip.
Right. And I'm like a Disney World ninja. Like Matt got to experience that. There's a whole statistical analysis of which rides you should ride when, at what times during the day to avoid lines. Everybody's waiting in these like hour and a half lines, and we're just going right through the park because we know which lines are going to be busy at which time.
One of my favorite NSCCs was Baltimore. I had a project that was just a few blocks away. So I was able to go visit the project. And I gave Doug my model, but he couldn't figure out how to unzip it. So it didn't get displayed at the NSCC booth.
We always
great job for me.
I think this is imposter syndrome again. I shot an episode about imposter syndrome, but then didn't post it because it wasn't good enough. But like we all believe that somebody else is doing this magic better work and that our work is not good enough, right? Or that there are these magical detailers who can do everything and never make a mistake. One of the things we try to talk about is our mistakes. These things do happen. You can be a fantastic detailer and there's still errors that are going to happen. No matter how hard you try, how diligent you are, these things come around.
Right. Well, the greatest detailer in the world still needs a checker. You just have to. Like
it was funny. Yesterday I was going through the detailing for steel construction, and you would assume that the example drawings are thoroughly checked, but I happened to notice an error in one of the drawings in the book Detailing for Steel Construction, which I thought was kind of a fateful thing. So you started moonlighting. How did you start getting into parametrics? Like, did you have a programming background before that, or has everything you've done just been, all right, I'm going to write this little bit and then Google it and then do a little bit more?
I suppose it kind of started back in the early 80s. I had a job. It was a Nissan boiler house in Smyrna. And it had a lot of connections that needed, what's that?
Is that Smyrna?
Smyrna, Tennessee. Yeah, just south of Nashville.
All right.
And the Nissan plant, they built a boiler house right there on the site for power generation. And they had a lot of connections that had to be designed. And back then, we didn't do a lot of hired of engineers to do connection designs. We just had to kind of bang it out. I did some programming on a programmable calculator in order to, there's a lot of prying connections.
It doesn't have to be a TI-80 series, does it?
It was a TI something.
That's what I use every day for my.
There's like a 59 or something comes to mind. And then later on when I got into AutoCAD, I started doing some Autolisp. Now talking about code that you can't read. Oh yeah, I mean.
What do they call it? Lost in stupid parentheses?
I've gone back and looked at a few of those and boy, what a mess. Couldn't figure out any head nor tails of it. But anyway, that's kind of helped get me started, at least being familiar with code logic and stuff. I have to give a lot of credit to Ron Tinker and Dave Henniger. Used Ronnie's code as a template to start my own. A lot of the stuff I was doing was consistent with what they were doing, how they were doing their code. Yeah, that's where open source code tends to help people get going in an endeavor like that.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's one of the reasons I think it's just a shame that some of the components are being released as compressed. Because honestly, the people who are doing these components, people like you and James McKinnon, us from time to time, not as much as we used to, but still, when you release that, the trickle down effect, the magnifier of how many people are helped by that and how much better the software gets is 10 times better. Like, I'm more excited about getting a new parametric than I am getting a new version of SDS2, far and away.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's great to see. It's very satisfying to see something that you write yourself to help you in your day-to-day work. Yeah, you mentioned components. I actually have not done a true component.
What's holding you up? Do you just haven't gotten into it, or?
Well, back when the code was not encrypted, I was able to read it, but it was so confusing. Some of the code I was looking at, I couldn't figure out the logic. I couldn't figure, just by looking at the code, what was required to do. However, I do have a sort of a sample component that somebody else wrote that I believe is going to help me write one. I fully intend to write at least one when I do. I'm going to say when and not if. When I do, I will share it, and hopefully it'll be something that'll be useful.
Yeah, the other day I was just kind of scrolling through your website. I had used the columns by grid parametric, which for those of you who are not in the know, if you're this particularly useful, it's not useful if the columns are shown in plan. That way, kind of traditional is easier. But if you have a column schedule that shows everything, having you type that information into a spreadsheet, you run the parametric, then poof, all your columns are put in with the right base plate, at the right elevation, with the right size. It's easier to check.
Yes, the checking is the big part of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because all you got to check is the spreadsheet. You don't have to check the, scrolling through the model.
That's right. Yeah, it was primarily for jobs that were kind of nasty, where you have to go dig, and instead of going into the model and trying to add it on an individual basis, to do a list, get them all in there in your list, in your spreadsheet, and check it, and then go with it. And then if something doesn't work right, erase them all, purge the model, and then start over again. Yeah,
and the big thing for me with it is Bluebeam has the ability. You can create custom. I don't know if you use Bluebeam,
yes.
But you can create custom columns. And with that, you can do a CSV export that you could import right into that. So you could literally highlight the column on the plan, type in the size, the grade, the elevations for it, and then export your comments from Bluebeam and just import that right into your model, and all of a sudden your columns are in there.
That's a little bit beyond what I can do, but that sounds great.
Right, and this is the joy of sharing, right? Like, you can teach me that thing, and then I'll teach you this thing, and we're both better for it.
Exactly.
I really miss, and I think it's a real loss. It used to be that on SDS's page, you go and you finish the parametric, you'd post it there, you'd explain what it did, and then people could download it directly from there. I would troll that page constantly for new parametrics and stuff like that. And it's missing now. So we created on our subreddit a sticky post for the same thing. So you can post a link to your stuff, and then people can comment and talk back and forth, because that was a big thing. I would see something from you and it'd be like, oh, here's a DXF import for doing a plate cutout. And then I was like, oh, if you can import a DXF, then I could take that and make this other thing that does this different thing with DXFs through that same step.
Sure.
Some of that community feeling has gotten lost by it. And the parametrics forum is really good, but it still doesn't have that same, I don't know, link. Here's a list of all the parametrics that exist right now by all the different people.
Yeah, well, when you're dealing with the parametrics forum, usually it's a lot of, I've got this one line of code that just doesn't work. Can anybody help me? And you don't have that context of, here's my whole, this thing adds hung lintels to a beam parametric, and I can't quite, they're not sharing the whole thing generally.
Right.
You lack that context, and you don't have that completed file when you're all done.
Yeah, there's almost like a black market for parametrics and components. Like the people who make them all kind of trade them between each other. So we've got ones and stuff like that. But you don't want to share somebody else's if they gave it just to you. And on the same token, you wouldn't expect somebody to do that unless you give them permission. But that kind of ties into the whole purpose of this channel is if we all know what we're thinking and what's going on, what we're doing, then we can all be a little bit better at our jobs.
Just something came to mind. The beam nailer holes parametric, and now it's a component that designed SDS2 made into a component from the parametric. I have to give credit to Mark Karpinski. I wrote it for him, and he paid me, I don't know, it was $150 or something like that. He paid me to write it. Didn't take that long to do. And then as I kept improving it, at some point in time, I asked him, hey, is it okay if I share this with everybody? He goes, sure. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Now, I can't say everybody's done that. There's been another parametric that I wrote for somebody. It had to do with custom properties. I asked them if we could share. Here's one price. You pay me this much, $100 or $150. And then I have permission to share it. Otherwise, pay me this much, which was a bit more. And he elected to pay me more money and not share it. So
that's really interesting, especially in this space where probably somebody else is going to end up writing that same thing. Because if you need it,
right.
Probably somebody else.
Somebody will, yeah.
Yeah. And but like you said, that's business. The custom properties thing is there's a lot of untapped potential there right now. I'm not sure why, but there's just a mental block with it as far as what can we do. It's almost like a global variable system. That's nice.
I don't do a lot of custom properties. They're just certain things that it's very well suited for. One in particular would be the stud counts. That's probably my favorite use of custom properties. There's a few other things I use them for. Well,
we use it a fair bit for checking and tracking that. One problem that we've seen recently is there's some bug, and this is, I think, in 2017, 2018 in general, there's a big problem with things being indiscriminately marked for detailing.
Right.
We have not been able to track it down, to pin it down and say, this event is causing marked for detailing. It shouldn't. But one that we did track down definitively is that custom properties, some of them that should not be marking things for detailing when you change them, are definitively changing things and marking them for detailing. And it cost me a huge problem on a big project that was, it's never like 2 days into the project and you got 3 weeks and plenty of time to recover. It's always the last day of a job when the deadline is tomorrow and you're trying to get the drawings out. And then you turn on your status thing to show, okay, what's marked for detailing? And your entire project is marked for detailing. Oh, it's really frustrating. But I don't feel like SDS2 has significantly enough acknowledged that problem or the man hours or terror that it causes us, because if you've got one that you spent a half an hour scrubbing, and a half an hour scrubbing a piece is a long time. It's tedious, it's annoying, and then later, for apparently no reason, that piece gets marked for detailing. You don't want to do the thing where you detail it BOM only just to clear that flag. You want to know, did something really change on this? Like, did I accidentally select, change all these like materials and now there's a hole in one of my stiffener plates that I don't know about or something like that? And it's terrifying and really frustrating.
I have the same problem. A lot of stuff gets marked for detailing that shouldn't. Basically, what I try to do is keep all my detail flags turned off until I'm ready to detail. And then I selectively detail certain member types in a certain area at a time. And I'll actually turn a detail flag on and detail them. Once that's done and put on sheets, then they're hidden. Okay, until I'm through with the entire sequence and everything is hidden that I know I'm done. Now, I'm also, as part of the status display, would be a higher priority is to display in green, bright green, if it's flagged for detailing. And that way, as you go, sometimes you got to tweak a member. As you edit it and see something wrong, you tweak it, and you see what's flagged for detailing immediately. As you go, you see something way over in the corner somewhere that shouldn't be flagged for detailing, then you probably know that you should know that, well, maybe this was a false flag.
Right. And it's that maybe almost definitely that always scares me. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't do anything to that beam that would have marked it for detailing.
Well, one thing that helps is Kurt Apted's list.
The parametric that checks the model.
Bill?
I think it's model BOM compare.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That gives you a better feeling about whether or not it's a false flag or a real flag.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's it on the first part of this series. As I said, we'll have 2 more parts coming up. If you get a man like Bruce on the phone for a while, you'd want to talk to him and ask him about 1,000 questions about his life and some of his experiences, his opinions on things. We got a lot of those, so we hope to be able to share them with you. Just kind of watching the statistics, we learned that about most of the time you guys have about 20 minutes to watch these videos, so we try and make them about that long whenever we can. Sometimes the tutorials run a little bit longer because we just can't teach it that quickly. But that's our goal. That's why we've broken this up into a 3-part series. Also, in the upcoming days, we will have some new videos coming out. We have some tutorials, as always. One of them is going to be on handrails, not so much how to detail them in SDS2, but why you might be detailing them wrong. What are some of the new code requirements? There was one thing in particular that I've been doing wrong for a long time that technically violates code. Nobody's ever noticed. Architects draw it wrong constantly, and it turns out that I drew it wrong too. So this is one way that you can get a little bit better. We hope to share more of those ways coming up here on the Steel Forum.